we won't talk anymore.
I'm gonna go back.
You, Barbara, not talking?
Oh, wow.
Oh, is that a
Try
first?
not to talk.
Wait till July 1.
Oh, yeah, roll, we're in trouble then.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm back.
Oh, I love your hat.
there's our
UCLA.
official
Yeah.
Rotary
Why not?
Where'd
bell.
Julie go?
And we're
You guys
calling our.
are you guys in Santa Barbara area? Is that where you?
We're all over the
Barbara,
place.
they named the town after her
Yeah.
in Santa Barbara for Barbara.
I've
Okay,
only
we're,
been here.
Ring the bell, Derek.
the cows are coming home. Okay. Rudy knows that. He's an old farm boy.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Welcome everybody to eclub World Peace. And we got a wonderful speaker this evening. Rudy will be introducing him as the meeting progresses. But in the meantime, we're going to find out who all of these people are that are creating chaos in the name of Rotary. So
There you go.
let's go, Rudy.
Damn
It's all good. Thanks, Derek. So on the top of my screen here, I've got Sis from Alabama. Everything's
Miss
great over in
Alabama.
Birmingham.
You never introduced
good
me,
there.
Rude.
I got my bride on here, Karen. She's got a lake behind her. We're in the same office, but she has a lake behind her. That's good. That's our little lake up here in the mountains. Barbara from Santa Barbara. Of course, Derek's out in the desert.
Yes.
Julie, good to see you.
Hey.
Catherine,
It's in
everything
Ohio.
tomorrow. You're
Tomorrow's
Tomorrowland.
fine.
She's
You
ready
need
for
not be
lunch.
afraid to come into tomorrow, Rudy.
Okay, what are the numbers for the lottery tonight?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, got it. Thanks. David, how's everything in Ashland?
Excellent. Just mighty fine. Sunny and rainy, both.
Good.
Say that way. I want
talked to your-
David to say one thing.
I talked to your
This mask is
governor-elect
for
today.
you. Yeah.
My favorite place, Ashland. My daughter went to school there for 2 years in the college.
Wonderful.
Yes, lovely place.
Cool.
Good place.
We're going to get to you, Carol. Carol, where are you from?
I'm in Palm Springs area, Rancho Mirage. Who
Well,
said they were
welcome.
in Palm Springs?
I are.
Yeah.
I is.
Hi, we're neighbors.
Welcome.
I
Thanks for
wanted you
joining
all
us.
to meet her. She's my new friend,
There you
Carol. And I wanted Derek to meet her.
Well,
go. All right.
to be
Cool.
neighbors, yes.
We'll get to Michael here in a minute. Terry, good to see you. Everything's good from the
Did
high
you get
desert.
David?
Greg, usually on your couch, laying back. You're upright tonight.
Rudy, did you get David in Winnipeg?
We haven't worked there yet, so we're
Oh, they
working
have,
on
okay, he's, okay.
it. Brian's there. He took down his new grandbaby.
So
Looking good. So Andrea, how's everything in Arizona?
Beautiful, windy, but beautiful.
You got a nice rainbow behind you there. Marcia, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Super.
Arkansas, yeah.
There you go. Jack, how are you?
doing great. Thanks, Rudy.
Arnold, how's that mustache going?
It's still there.
All right, good. Dennis, how's everything in Connecticut?
Terrific.
In a few weeks, we have a doctor from Connecticut that's going to talk to us about
COVID.
COVID-19.
Oh, we don't have near enough info on that.
you.
Yeah, so it's good stuff. So actually, he's related to Karen. Cliff, you look
Is it still snowing?
relaxing there. Bob, how's things in Florida?
Hot and sticky.
Hot and sticky. Okay, we'll leave it to you then.
Definition of Florida.
Philip, how are you?
Hey, Rudy. I'm actually up in Nevada City visiting Stephen Dinan in Deva.
Oh, cool. Say hi for me.
Okay.
That's where the baby is.
Exactly. Peggy, how's things in Edmonton?
Doggy. It's been raining for days.
Oh, great.
Raining. Lucky.
Flooding.
Good stuff. We don't have your
That's
mom with
not
you
good.
tonight?
Not tonight. She's still happy from the other week.
I'm glad that worked out. Denise, how are you?
Good. My camera's not working.
Yeah, we see that. Tim, nice hat. Lisa, how are you?
Hey, Rudy. Fine, very well, thanks.
Good. I like that background.
Yeah, where is it, Lisa?
Sedona.
That's what I thought.
That's a
Oh, absolutely. And that's a real picture.
Sala, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
This is an orca.
Betsy, oh, I love your hat, Sala.
Went on a whale watch trip. This is an orca.
How neat.
Oh,
Beautiful.
Killer.
Rob, thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. I can see you're a really tough crowd. I'm not sure I'm going to show up next week.
Oh, you'll show up next week. You'll be a good show. Philip's going to be interviewing you, I think. So
Yeah. He's going to give me a softball question. I wanted to mention that our intern Jen Fry is also on. She's calling in from California as well.
oh, cool.
Where in California are you?
Oh, she's in
I'm
Washington
actually-
State. Sorry, she's in Washington
Oh.
State.
Yeah. I work with some people in California, remotely, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
You can come visit. We're not too bad down here. Thanks for joining us, Jen. Warren, how are you?
We're great. Portland's super.
Good. Fergal's on. Mr. Rotary Peace, good to see you.
Yeah, I'm here. How you doing?
Doing great. Ann, how's everything tonight?
Very
Good.
Good stuff. Estera, you can unmute yourself there. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. My camera's also not working. But hello, how are you? Good to see you all.
Yeah, we're doing great. We're doing great.
I love your hat, Rudy.
Oh, thanks. I'll send you one. I think my wife asked why I bought 3, but what's there? So.
Nice.
I support the cause here. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, good. Good. See who I missed here.
Did you do Dennis Wong?
I did Dennis. Yeah, we hadn't seen Dennis in a little bit. But
Why don't you ask if you missed anybody?
I guess, was there anybody I missed?
Yeah, this is Bill Timpson, Fort Collins, Colorado. Just joined.
Yeah, you just came in, Bill. How are you?
Doing well for under the circumstances.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us. Are you in Rotary?
Yes.
What club?
Fort Collins Rotary Club. We have an active project in Burundi, East Africa, on sustainable peace building.
Cool.
Oh, good.
Good. Send me some email me some info on that, please.
Okay, love to.
We'll connect on that. That'd be great. Good stuff. Yeah, we got a great crowd tonight. We got an amazing speaker tonight going to share with us. Derek, do you have any other comments or announcements?
No, but I would just like to acknowledge the people that are visiting for the first time. And I'm looking at, well, Bob Smith is not new. Let me see, who is it? I don't see Richard from Sudbury, Ontario, but he sent an email that he's got a project and there's a program on Friday. Do you know anything about that, David? David in Winnipeg? Hello, you're muted.
I know about it.
Okay, go ahead, Ann.
I'm just writing something on the chat list. We have about 100 participants from India, US, and Canada, plus our usual 50 or 60 from my district. We're going to be talking with Ira Helfand and David Combs about nuclear weapons. So I'm really psyched because the Southern Indian districts are really interested in this topic, and they want to get rid of nuclear weapons. So we'll see where we go with that. But
Well, good.
I put a link on there. There's still room for registration.
Well, maybe I can connect.
Yeah, you want to email that and I'll get it up to the group, Ann.
Yeah. And maybe I can connect with those people in the Kolkata area. That's where I was in
Oh, that would be very nice.
November and, no, pardon me, February.
I'm
So
hoping
I'm going
we're gonna have some-
back again next year. So
Yeah. We also have tonight our newest honorary member from Portland, Oregon, Al Jubitz.
Hey, thank you for that, Rudy.
Hey.
Those of you who don't know,
It's an honor.
the board voted to make Al Jubitz an honorary member of our club. He would be a regular member, except he belongs to his Portland club.
With the big boys.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
and
you,
girls.
Derek and Rudy and Karen and all the other board members. And it's wonderful to be recognized that way. I do appreciate it very much.
No,
That's our
Al-
connection. That's our connection with the Northwest, and we have Sala in Seattle, who is also an honorary member. She was our
Is
first.
she a member, honorary member?
She is
Yeah,
now.
Sala's an
Yes,
honorary
yes.
member, yeah.
Nominate
And,
her.
and what we'd like to do is when people, as an example, Anne is a regular that drops in. The people in Winnipeg, they're frequent visitors, as is Richard in Sudbury, Ontario. So we would be pleased to have you people accept the invitation to be an honorary member of our club. And it's good input for us, and it broadens the scope of Rotary. Because sometimes when we're a virtual club, we don't have that camaraderie that sometimes is available on a local club. So join the clan, and most of all important, join us for that first half hour before the meeting starts early. And so I think Barbara was saying it's our holy hubbub. It's just a chance to really bond with people and appreciate other people's sense of humor. I attempt humor, but I fail. So Rudy?
Al, could you put in a 2-sentence plug for the Peace Rotary Action Group for Peace?
Al?
Yes, founded in 2012 or 11. It's now 8 or 9 years old. What we're finding works really, really well is if you all belong to other Rotary clubs, to become a Peace Builder Club. And we have Peace Builder Clubs, almost 200 around the world now. And a definition of a Peace Builder Club is a club with a Peace Builder Committee. And they do local and international projects like the international committees do and so forth. But it's teaching peace, it's learning peace, it's being peaceful, it's all of the above. And it's wonderful to have the structure and the recognition that you can have when you do that local work. You can have international colleagues all connected by the RAG. So yeah, please join the RAG individually and then have your club join it. As
we are a Peace Builder Club, Al.
E-Club, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, and
and I'll put a plug in for, if you have any money left over in your budget, like your peace budget, by the end of the year, send it to the RAG and it'll be matched, which is nice.
We've
Well,
been
it's nice to
asking
have all
for-
of these people on board. And we have David Wick in Ashland, Oregon, and Ashland is a peace city. So we have good networking with people that are extending the hand of freedom and the hand of love and peace. So
and Brian Berman with
Brian
the
up in
City of Peace as well. So
yep, he's a master at creating peace
Exactly.
symbols as well. Yes.
But Al is very supportive of our peace centers and our peace fellows, and we appreciate that support for our Rotary Peace Centers, Al, and the work you're doing there and supporting and actually employing peace fellows. And if you join the Rotary Action Group for Peace and also request and pay for the monthly Peace Science Digest, an incredible work that Al's group puts out from the War Prevention Initiative that he has. And he's somebody that's committed his life to creating peace. And we appreciate that, Al, and that's why we've honored you with joining our club here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I signed on tonight.
And
You
Al,
didn't know.
Al, I also want to thank you for your support of Peace Jam.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, a very, very good curriculum. Peace Jam is fantastic. Started in UK and
Thank you.
it's around the world, right? Thanks,
Yes.
Sala. Yeah.
Well, we also have.
I have a question. Is it possible to belong to two clubs? My own
No.
club in Colorado.
That's why
Okay.
we're
That's why we have
offering the
honorary
honorary
members.
membership. Yeah.
Okay. You can only be a member of one club, but you can be a member of a Rotary Club and an honorary member of another club.
Okay.
I'd like to make mention that we have a number of people that are working on these projects that are here on a regular basis. And we have Mr. UN and we have Mrs. UN. And I'm referring to Dennis Wong. He's our resident United Nations ambassador from our club. And over in the town was named after, and that's Barbara Muller. So we've got both of them going for us.
President Derek, this is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And my husband was an intern when it started. And somebody said, I pity you, young man, because you're only going to last 5 years. And here we are at the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, our global voice. Right, Dennis Wong?
Right.
Yeah, I want to,
Yeah.
hey, Rudy, could I just tip the hat to
Barbara, you could introduce me.
another Northwesterner, Rudy?
Sure.
Robert Mueller.
Warren, if you look at Warren Banks, who's a member of this club, you'll see he's blowing off some steam. And you might want to say why, Warren.
Why is Warren blowing off steam, Al Jubitz?
That's Fuego, which is 15 miles outside of Antigua, Guatemala. We were there that year in late January, February, and in March, in May, it really blew up and wiped out a village of 250 people.
Wow.
And it does this, what you see almost constantly. So it's quite a place.
Speaking
I
of
thought
blowing up,
it was Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, I was thinking
They had his 40th anniversary yesterday.
right. That was
Today?
the 18th.
Oh, no, it was yesterday.
The 18th. Yeah,
Yesterday.
and I remember that was a wonderful opportunity. My son was probably 5 or 6 years old at the time, and we heard this rumble. This is in Bellingham, Washington. And he called my in-laws in Portland, and he told his grandfather that Mount St. Helens had blown. And the grandfather said, hell, if it was going to blow, I would have known. Well, the thing is, it blew to the north, and the people in Portland weren't aware of it. But he went up to the landing on their second floor, and he said a profanity, it's blowing, it's gone. So that was, and I talked to my son, who's now 44 years old. And he said, yes, he remembers that time, and arguing with his grandfather that the mountain had blown. So Al Jubitz survived, as did Warren Banks. So all right.
I was in Seattle.
So you weren't responsible then.
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, Rudy, let's go
we'll
to
move
our
on
guest.
to our program tonight.
Yes.
And if everybody would mute themselves, except Michael, you can unmute yourself, please. That'd be great. That'd be great. Tonight we have an opportunity to have somebody present to us about one of our Rotary partners and how we really have embraced this organization around peace in Rotary. Rotary has several partners out there, including the Peace Corps, Mediators Beyond Borders, and we also have an organization called Institute for Economics and Peace. They're a think tank out of Australia that was set up by and founded by CEO Steve Killalay. And Steve's think tank uses real data to look at peace and conflict and measuring that globally, country by country, area by area. And also, besides looking at those areas where conflict is, has begun to look at how do we create peace in a positive way. And we've also got a peace literacy session online at Rotary.org that you can take a peace literacy class based on their work. Our speaker tonight is managing, he's the Executive Director of Americas for Institute of Economics and Peace. He has relations with U.S. government and UN in New York and works with U.S. civil organizations, foundations, universities, think tanks to continue to develop that presence throughout North, Central, and South America, all the Americas, and really looking at this positive peace framework on how we really create peace in our communities and around the world. And it's a very, again, it's a very positive way to do that. And he'll explain a little more about that process. His background before joining IEP was in education, job creation, economic development, working with emerging nations that are affected by or prone to natural disasters. He's worked on poverty, gang violence. He's an expert on vocational training, training centers, developing courses for vulnerable youth, adults with low literacy levels. And before this, he was in the mechanical engineering area, had a construction company. He's trilingual. So even though he might have a little accent here, he actually does speak English. And we are very glad to have with us this evening. And thank you so much, Michael Collins, for joining us tonight. Michael?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rudy. And I appreciate the comments and the description. You know, you guys were just talking about volcanoes, and despite my tree linguality and having participated in all these activities, I'm somebody who until the age 14 thought that volcanoes were extinct. So, you know, when I was a kid, you'd read, you know, books about dinosaurs and you'd see volcanoes and, hey, we don't have any dinosaurs. Surely we don't have any volcanoes either. Well, boy, was I wrong. So once again, thank you very much for this invitation. And it's wonderful to be able to talk with our partners within Rotary. We've had a strategic partnership with Rotary for 4 years now, which I'd love to tell you a bit more about tonight. The activities that we've done to date, as well as the activities that we would like to do together in the future. But in terms of providing sort of a bit of profile of the organizations for those of you who may not know us, IEP was set up in 2007 to answer essentially two fundamental questions, right? What are the most peaceful countries on earth, and what do they have in common? And the idea was that if we know what they have in common, we can try and emulate and build peace by focusing on the positives rather than the negatives, right? The common analogy that we often use is kind of like the human body. So medicine can help cure or manage disease, but it's rarely an adequate substitute for healthy living, right? It's only when we understand that when we sleep well, when we do exercise, when we eat well, that helps stave off disease. Understanding the underlying characteristics that help build peace is by far the most productive way to go. And that term positive peace is based very much on that. And although it's a term that we use a lot, it's not necessarily one that we invented. In fact, it's definitely not one that we invented. It was invented, I'm sure, as many of you know, by what is considered the father of peace building, Johann Galtung. What we did invent, however, is somewhat the approach that we use. And as Rudy mentioned, it's largely quantitative in nature. So in order to explain this without a presentation, I'd just like you to imagine essentially the Billboard 100 with the top 100 songs, with the one song being the best at the very top, and those progressively changing over time. Now, we do the same, ranking 163 countries around the world according to their level of peacefulness, based on a very tight definition of peace, which is the lack of violence or fear of violence. And that incorporates a whole different variety of metrics, which can include things such as homicide rates, weapons possession, incarceration, likelihood of violent demonstrations, etc. And with that, we calculate a snapshot, levels of peacefulness in the world over time. And we present that on an annual basis through a report that's called the Global Peace Index. Now, this is all fine and dandy, knowing what is the most peaceful country at any point given in time. But the important thing is, well, what is it that the most peaceful countries on earth have that the least peaceful countries don't, right? That is fundamentally what we want to know. So what we then do is we cross-reference all of the information that we have on this side with thousands upon thousands of data sets of socio-economic, political, cultural, attitudinal surveys, indices, databases, and indicators, and essentially see which are the ones, when there are ups and downs in a country's level of peacefulness, which are these different indicators that are changing with it, right? Which are the ones that are increasing or decreasing? And ideally, in a perfect scenario, which are these characteristics here that are changing before there's an actual change in levels of peace over here? So you can actually really fundamentally get to the nuts and bolts of what it is that causes ups and downs in peacefulness, what it is that fundamentally builds peace. So this part of our research, mainly through data aggregation, data consolidation, and statistical analysis, has kind of formed the backbone, I should say, of our work for the last 8 years. So what did we find? Peaceful societies have 8 fundamental qualities or characteristics. We call them the 8 pillars of positive peace. So in simple terms, they have a well-functioning government, an equitable distribution of resources, a free flow of information, a good relations with neighbors, high levels of human capital, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, my apologies, low levels of corruption, and a sound business environment. The countries that improve in positive peace, countries that have these particular elements within them, we have found to be a lot more resilient. And I would actually like to go into this in a bit more detail, because obviously COVID is the theme of the day. And whereas we don't necessarily have a lot of data right now as to what are the countries that have been most capable of dealing with COVID, we are confident that we will see in the data when this comes out that the countries with higher levels of positive peace, the country that have these 8 pillars, solid pillars, are the ones that are most able to deal with that particular shock. Countries with the higher levels of positive peace have better economic outcomes and higher levels of well-being as well. And one of the interesting things about all of these pillars as well is that they interact systemically. So they're very independent. They feed off each other, and causality can't really be determined for any individual pillar. So actually, you know, when countries decide to invest in a particular pillar, that can actually, in many cases, lead to a negative consequence. So an example of that would be in the case of Mexico, for example. It has a very sound business environment. Now that's great in many ways, but it's also providing the infrastructure to a lot of the drug cartels that operate like multinational companies. So unless you have other pillars, you know, with regards to the rule of law, well-functioning government, you actually see that a lot of investments in areas can have a negative effect. And that by far, the countries globally that become more peaceful over time do so by making small but sustained improvements in all of these pillars simultaneously. We also find that the pillars are much more than the sum of their parts as well. That when there is investment made in all of the pillars, the outcome is actually more than expected. I often think back to when I was a kid and I used to live in Spain, I used to get 25 pesetas for pocket money. And all I could buy was either bread or chocolate spread, right? But if I get together with my friend, he gets the same amount of pocket money, he gets chocolate spread, I get the bread, and we can actually share that with everybody else as well. These systems are also self-reinforcing. So providing you can actually move a system, in this case, a nation state, and provide it with a particular momentum, it can actually reinforce itself. It has a feedback loop that actually allows it to build into a virtuous circle. Now, if there is a country decreasing in levels of positive peace, that can actually become a vicious circle as well. So we refer to this thing as a stickiness of peace. So countries that are peaceful generally have a tendency to become more peaceful over time because they have that underlying resilience. And countries that are least peaceful become least peaceful because that underlying structure is worn away. And then lastly, and perhaps the most interesting thing when it comes to our experience of working with Rotary, is that we find that this system of pillars, or systems in general, don't exist on their own. So whereas we as an institute do a lot of research around nation states, each nation state forms part of a region of nation states. The United Nations is another example of a system. The environment is another example of a system. These are larger systems. But within the system of a nation state, you have municipalities, you have communities, you have factories, you have schools, you have penitentiaries. Each of these constitute an individual system. And what we have found time and time when we have looked at this is that conceptually, this allows for the application of the positive peace framework, these 8 pillars of positive peace, on systems of any scale. So you can kind of sort of use this framework to be able to do a project assessment or a community needs assessment. Moreover, a community may be able to use these 8 pillars of positive peace to be able to determine where the particular gaps are, strengths are in their community with regard to what they deem to be their potential needs. And this is one of the things that we have tried to explore and was the main reason for the development of our partnership with Rotary, because here was an organization that was doing, you know, an outstanding ability to be able to undertake community projects at a local level with a keen interest in expanding its peace portfolio. So how could the positive peace framework complement this? And can it be used for the tools that I just described? Can it be used for a more comprehensive or holistic perspective? Can an individual project or a particular community that you're willing to support, or can that community itself look at the world through the lens of positive peace, through the pillars of positive peace, and identify particular actions that it can take to build peace within that community? So that is a general description about our research. And I'm sorry, in all honesty, I was prepared to share some slides, so I've kind of given a bit of a sort of a scatterdash presentation about this. And but next, what I'd love to do is provide a bit of detail as to what we've been doing with Rotary until now. Rotary has been absolutely amazing and has taken this on full steam. So we've been coordinating with Rebecca Kroll, who is in charge of the Peace and Conflict portfolio. We've developed a very strong relationship with the Peace Rag as well, working primarily with Reem. We've had very good working experience with Al as well. And we have recently completed, we've done multiple positive peace workshops throughout the Americas, in Colombia and in Mexico. And we've recently completed the comprehensive training of 50, what we call positive peace activators within Rotary. So these are people who have been trained in all of IEPs, research all of our material, and have a very comprehensive understanding of the pillars of positive peace and how they could be used or interpreted or used as a tool in any of the particular projects that Rotary may be working on, either locally, via the club, via the district, or internationally as well, in support of another club via an ICC or via some other form of grant or relationship. We also had the opportunity to develop the Positive Peace Academy. That is an online resource that I very much hope, Rudy, is actually linked to as part of the Rotary Literacy Program. If not, we would love to be able to do that so that people realize that they have access to that resource there. And that goes through, in an extensive way, IEPs, research, and provides more information about positive peace. Just to return very quickly to the positive peace activators, the reason that we have trained them is precisely to support Rotarians throughout the world. So these 50 are currently 25 in the US, and 25 are currently being trained for Latin America. There's going to be an additional 25 in Africa and an additional 25 in Europe, and hopefully we're going to be getting another 25 in the Asia region as well. And that will be the first 150. So with that, I would love to expand greatly, but perhaps I'd best do it by responding to your questions and comments.
Yeah, so I think, thank you, Michael. One of the opportunities, perhaps you could explain the positive pillars of peace, how that connects with our 6 areas of focus in Rotary, which are similar, and the 17 or Sustainable Development Goals with the UN. These really fit together quite well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the say for example, with the peace and conflict prevention and resolution portfolio that you guys, and with the SDGs, the SDGs 16 as well. These are all very peace-focused initiatives. But one of the elements of positive peace is very much this kind of this comprehensive framework. And I have to say that both of these frameworks, the Rotary one, based on the 6 areas of focus, and the SDGs based on the 17 SDGs, are incredibly complementary in every way. You know, one of the main messages that we provide is that really, you know, fundamentally, without a basic peace, you can never achieve the levels of collaboration necessary to be able to tackle the world's most significant challenges. So, Rudy, was there something more specific you already had in mind?
If you look at some of the work that you've done, and there's some questions here about the United States. I know Dennis wanted to know where we ranked in the U.S. on the Peace Index versus the rest of the world. But then also, I think there should be some comment from you on how do we create within our cities where we have violence, where we have poverty, how do we use the positive pillars of peace to make as Rotarians, to make a positive impact to turn that around?
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to the United States currently is 128th on the Global Peace Index, and that's out of 163 countries. And that often ruffles a lot of feathers, and I can explain why. It's actually, when you look at the index, you actually see the U.S. in some cases being below Central American countries that are a lot more unsafe when you actually visit them. In fact, there's a large exodus of people leaving those countries coming to the US as well. But there are a number of elements that drag the US down. For example, it has very high homicide rates. It has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world. It has an extremely high level of investment in the military as well, and very high levels of gun ownership as well. All of those, and it's a nuclear power with a very large nuclear arsenal. So all of those things count, I suppose you could say, against the United States with regards to that. Now, the US has been doing a lot better on its positive peace score, or does a lot better on its positive peace score. I believe it's currently ranked 28th, but it has actually been going down for the last more than 10 years now. So yeah, and I think a lot of the altercations that we are now seeing, and especially with the last administration, are not necessarily something that have been a direct cause of that, but has been a symptom of underlying challenges that have been prevalent or increasing for a large amount of time. One of the main domains that we have seen dropping in the US has been the attitudes domain. So this would be things like group grievances, for example, factionalized elites, and the quality of information that people receive as well. So tied to our free flow of information domain. In answer to your second question, Rudy, one of the ways of being able to do this is, and let's take COVID as a particular thing here. There are a number of lessons learned that I think that we are already seeing when we see how the country or our own municipality has been able to respond to the crisis. The positive peace framework, and unfortunately I'm not able to provide you guys with kind of sort of the overall graphic that may provide some clarity, but basically provides the tool for each person or each club to be able to assess what are the potential gaps or challenges in any particular area. With regards to well-functioning government, and let's say with regards to the municipality's response to COVID, what are the particular elements that worked well? What are and therefore don't need to be strengthened further? What are the particular gaps that were identified in those particular areas? What were the main concerns with regards to perceived levels of corruption? What are the things that worked well? With regards to the free flow of information, was information received in a timely manner? What other forms of information or what other forms of communication could be put in place to be able to make sure that people receive the levels of information that they need? With regards to acceptance of the rights of others, another key pillar of positive peace, what are the fundamental emotional needs of people during this time? And are we catering to all of the people from different genders, from different religions? And do they have access to the things that they consider to be important? For example, online church services, for example. And essentially cycling through each of these pillars to be able to identify what the potential weaknesses are, and therefore where any individual Rotary Club or district can contribute. Let me give you just one more example. Think of contact tracing in a country with high levels of positive peace versus a country with low levels of positive peace. Now, for contact tracing, first of all, you need to have somebody who has no fear to go to the hospital or is able to go to the hospital to test themselves for COVID. That might already be challenging for people in many circumstances in countries throughout the world. So an equitable distribution of resources, access to healthcare is critical for a country to be able to have the levels of resilience necessary to meet this crisis. And in a very particular item, contact tracing. Let's say that person is then deemed to be positive for COVID, and now they need to inform the government essentially of all of the people they have interacted with, right, over the last however long it may be. That in itself requires significant levels of trust, right, in the government, and that my information is going to be maintained secure. There needs to be free flow of information between us to understand exactly what you're going to do with the information and how that's going to be acted upon. Furthermore, those people that I have had contact with, when they have the police knocking at their door, they have to be in a comfortable enough position to be able to, essentially open the door and to be able to respond as necessary. So as you can see, just with that single thing alone, the reaction in a country with high levels of positive peace versus one with low levels of positive peace can be completely different. And that alone can lead to significant increases in violent conflict and frustration.
Rudy, did you see Philip's question?
You're muted, Rudy.
Rudy?
He had a good question.
Michael?
Yes.
First of all, congratulations with the work. I've been a big fan of the Global Peace Index for a long time. Have you looked at anything looking forward, like making any bold suggestions about here are the pillars for global peace by like 2040 or 2050 or something like that? Like what would be the highest priorities in addition, either complementing the SDGs or just, other priorities?
Yeah, so we are actually going to be doing some very concrete research around that. And that revolves around something called the Ecological Threat Register. And what that will actually do is that will focus on the upcoming ecological threats. So things like desertification, things like increasing, rising waters, increasing temperatures, blights on agriculture. And it will actually cross-reference that with countries with particularly low or with varied degrees of positive peace as well. And what that's actually, this is going to be in partnership with UN 75 actually, what that's actually going to enable us to do is to be able to identify where are the areas where there will be significant risk of mass human displacement within the next 25 years. So that provides us with a much more concrete ability to be able to undertake, when I say us, I mean, this would need to be a much wider multi-stakeholder partnership, which we're currently studying, to be able to develop particular policy and programming that's going to be able to counter some of those vulnerabilities by building positive peace within those particular countries. With regards to broad recommendations, a lot of our research has been developed precisely for those. So the 8 pillars of positive peace are, dare I say, sort of the epitome of simplicity, of how much we've been able to simplify the material. And I do think that it does need to be contextualized. And it is very much a unique solution for every country in question, in the same way that it's a unique solution to every system in question. A form of government in one system can be completely different to a form of government in another. There is essentially perhaps a tribe somewhere whose main form of government is when the elders sit around the acacia tree. Here we function via Congress. So the actual application of the pillars themselves really does vary. And what we aim to provide is more the conceptual tool that can then be adapted as needed. And we call it largely a self-determined process. So in short, Phil, I think the answer is no to, this is what humanity should be doing, beyond reinforcing all of these 8 pillars, doing so in a way that it is consistent and that is simultaneously across all of these pillars. That is by far what we have seen has led to higher levels of positive peace and, by extension, a reduction in conflict over time.
Jack, you want to unmute yourself there and ask your question, please?
Sure. Hey, Michael, this has been fascinating.
have you tried to work with the UN or any municipality or city adopting the Pillars of Peace as a goal to work for? It seems like what you have to offer is such a thinking with data to support it. It'd be wonderful if some entity systematically used it to try to make improvements.
That's a great question, Jack, and that is definitely the area that we are trying to explore the most. And I can share 3 examples. And the first one is actually with a local government in the Philippines, in Mindanao. And this was part of their counter-terrorism program. They've been fighting terrorism for 40 years without success. And in parallel, they developed this project based on the Pillars of Positive Peace called 911, which is well, it's the same number as the police here in the US. And what that did was it kind of reinforced parts of the police force with regards to how they interacted with each of the pillars. One of those elements included improving communications with the population, opening a helpline that people could call beyond 911, but just other forms of communication. And that process actually enabled a lot of the conversations that then happened that led to over 500 terrorists surrendering their arms and being progressively reintegrated. And one of the elements of this was when they were finally able to communicate neutrally through the hotline, these terrorists were saying, look, until now, we really didn't have this form of communicating viably with you. We couldn't call 911. We couldn't walk into a police station. We needed some form of additional communication and an increase of free flow of communication with you in order to be able to talk through these things. Another example is actually the other way. In this case, it was a civil society group bringing the key gaps with regards to gender-based violence policy in a particular Mexican municipality, using IEP data to essentially make sure that the government put in place gender-based violence policy because they were able to show how much of a gap there was in that particular area. And the third one I'd like to share is actually from a Rotarian called Lorelei Higgins. She's one of our Positive Peace activators. She currently works with the city of Calgary. She works for their emergency preparedness committee, and she is currently going through the process of assessing all of their activities through the lens of Positive Peace to be able to see what are the particular things that they could be adding to their current programming and policy to be able to make sure that their response is more holistic, that their response and that their preparation builds resilience to a future challenge similar to COVID or something else.
David Wick, you had a question or comment, please. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think you're mentioning that. My question was just an example of the application to a community, to a city specific, because that's where with the National Cultural Peace Commission, that's what we're very involved with, and actually working with Al in June to help a couple of the Rotary clubs become peace building clubs. But I find that's where our local rubber meets the road is how do we apply in real terms these ideas. So I just was wondering an example of how you've applied this to a community or a city.
Yeah, and those were some of the examples, but this is definitely an area that we want to explore this a lot more. I've actually been in touch with Rudy in the past precisely about this because we have a distinct interest. One of the things that I would love to make clear is that what we try and avoid is providing specific recommendations for the most part for any community as to exactly what they should be doing. What we try and do is we try and provide the facilitation either directly through IEP or through the Positive Peace activators. So in this case, imagine a scenario in which you are able to get a town council together. You'll be able to provide them with a grounding in Positive Peace to be able to make sure that they feel comfortable with the overall framework as a whole and the fact that it is data-based and evidence-based. And then you can go through the process of essentially evaluating how your community or how your particular project or your particular department interacts with each of these particular elements. And the form that that takes is actually pretty free-flowing, David. There's no currently set of questions that we have deemed unnecessary to ask. We actually find that by providing a free flow of ideas and discussion around this topic is actually by far the best way of generating ideas about things that could be done. But in a nutshell, it revolves around, okay, well, how does our project cater for, in the case of the sound business environment, for example, how are we making sure that we are benefiting from any of the particular capacities that the private sector already has? How are we making sure that our project is not actually negatively affecting any of the particular services that the private sector are providing? Are we providing a duplication of services here, for example? Is there a particular small amount of coordination that we could do to potentially put different private sector partners in touch so that they can contribute to this project? That, just by analyzing it through that project alone, can provide a whole punch list or checklist of particular items and ideas of things that could be followed upon. By doing that throughout the pillars, you can actually generate 50, 60, 100 ideas of potential activities or small tweaks that could be made to the project to build positive peace. Number one, better understand how your project fits within the whole system. If you have a food security project, let's say that's dedicated to equitable distribution of resources, right? You are concentrated fully on one pillar of positive peace, and providing all the other pillars are there, you're really doing a good job because you're reinforcing that particular pillar. But then within that, within your particular project, a system within a system, how can you analyze your own project there, and what opportunities can be maximized?
Excuse me, Anne has an observation and also a question. Anne?
Just a second. Yes, thanks. Very interesting, and I'm glad to see more concrete projects and ideas coming out of it. So US and Russia both have around 7,000 nuclear weapons. How would you go about calculating the impact on positive peace if one or both of them will just eliminate their nuclear weapons?
So it's massive. We are very happy to contribute our research and our materials to that cause, and we do. We try ourselves not to make a moral judgment on the amount of investment that any individual country should take on the military. But what we do say is that the military is fundamentally a symptom either of violence, right? It's one country with the ability or the willingness to commit violence on another, or it's the fear of violence. You have a military because you want to defend yourself. The cost of violence in 2019 was $14.1 trillion. Now, 40% of that was military expenditure, and a percentage of that, probably a large percentage, was related to maintaining the nuclear arsenal. That is significant, right? Imagine if we had a peaceful world, that's $14 trillion on an annual basis. Now, nobody can imagine a peaceful world, right? But let's say 10%, that's $1.4 trillion that could be used for building positive peace.
I've got a couple more questions here, and I know we're getting close on time. I'd like to jump over to Julie. I think you had a question. Please unmute yourself. There you go.
Right. Hi, yeah, I had a question about whether you only analyzed countries or whether you analyzed regions that are in dispute perhaps, or even two regions of one country for the Global Peace Index.
So for the Global Peace Index in particular, we do generally keep it at nations and territories. But we do produce sub-regional indices as well. For example, we produce the Mexico Peace Index, which just came out the 2020 edition came out a few days ago. We've actually done a US Peace Index in the past, a UK Peace Index, and a Germany Peace Index as well.
So yeah, if you look at particularly if you go to Institute for Economics and Peace online,
you'll see those peace indexes, and particularly down in the States and Mexico. They begin to break that down.
In the case of the states of Mexico, that's I think it's 32, I believe 32 states, and that is broken down at the municipal level. Now, the indicators do change when you become more regional. One of the challenges of constructing the impact, the index, is you're trying to do it for 163 countries, and it needs to be globally comparable. When you're dealing with smaller things, it actually becomes easier, right? Because there's less data to compare. And with regards to positive peace and these pillars, we have generally simplified this to 23 indicators at the global level. But if you wanted to do a country-specific positive peace assessment, you could actually use 200, 300 indicators. Part of the work that the Institute does is to actually work with different organizations, with governments, to do detailed positive peace country assessments, to be able to better establish where the opportunities for investment are.
Yeah, great. Dennis, you want to unmute yourself? You got your hand up.
Yes, I just actually follow up on a couple of things. One of the things you mentioned that, first of all, I like the Global Peace Index and a Positive Peace Index. I think they're very helpful. The question sometimes we have is, how do we apply the 8 pillars of peace? And I understand that IEP does not take a position, but then as Rotary and Rotarians, we want to move towards peace, or better peace. And the thing is, and you mentioned about the military spending, and the thing is, what can we do to actually change the policy, change the budgets where it lowers the budgets, you know, being well-functioning government or equal distribution of resources, et cetera. And I think that's where I get stuck as a Rotarian, taking those next steps on what to do.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And let me answer the second question first. We hope our research can provide significant ammunition in that domain. Yes, we calculate the cost of violence, which you could say is kind of a shocking headline. But more importantly, we also calculate the benefits of peace, right? And particularly the benefits of positive peace. And we show how countries with higher levels of positive peace have significantly better economic outcomes, have significantly higher levels of well-being as well as significantly higher levels of resilience, like I mentioned before. So those are all extremely good talking points for the most part, and we hope to have data that can be used to reinforce those points. And we also help that, you know, with, it's never good to talk about COVID as an opportunity, but, you know, this as a global pandemic really brings this conversation to the forefront, especially with the momentum behind UN 75, as you know, right now. I definitely think that there is an opportunity for much more concrete steps in that regard. And with regards to the application of positive peace, I'd say no, we do generally have a very good idea as to how we believe the positive peace framework should be used. And that is fundamentally using the 8 pillars as a reflection point for the particular system that you are analyzing. What we can't say from the get-go is, this is what you should be focusing, because we don't have the contextual understanding of the particular pillar that you're trying to analyze. So I would actually turn it back on you and say, any individual Rotarian who is working with the community to assess their needs, you are the expert to be able to understand what is needed. What we provide is we provide the lens to look at the current, to look at and establish what the current needs are.
Do you agree that most of the things are policy driven, where you need to change the laws or whatever it is on moving forward?
No, I don't. No, I don't. Personally and professionally. And one of the professional arguments I'd share is that, for example, one of the things that we've seen in decreases with regards to decreases in levels of positive peace and subsequent increases in levels of violence is a shift in the attitudes domain. So the positive peace framework, or the pillars, can also be split into three different domains: attitudes, institutions, and structures, right? Institutions are essentially governments, the formal processes by which we function. The structures are formal and also informal. They're more kind of the inherent networking that exists, the way that the schools are run, the way that the healthcare is run, how those things interact, how the private sector interacts. The attitudes is much more related to people's behaviors and their perceptions. What we've seen over the last 10 years has been a significant deterioration in the attitudes domain. And that comparably, that could also be very closely tied with people's access to additional information, the age of the internet as well. Now, how much of the age of the internet can be then attributed to, well, you know, policies that have been put in place to facilitate that? Perhaps. But what I would say is that the attitudes, the way people behave, and the perceptions that people have a significant impact, not only in positive peace, but also ultimately in levels of peacefulness as well.
Yeah, I think you're right on target there with the behaviors. Fergal, are you still on? You have a question?
Thanks, Rudy. Thanks, Michael, for that presentation. Yeah, my question was just, I should mention I actually work with Rebecca in Evanston, who you know well. My question was just in relation to if you had any examples of countries where, or local governments where there was a community desire for positive peace structures to be incorporated in public policy formation, and if, you know, if they'd been resisted by government officials at government level.
Yeah, Philip. So the couple of examples that I gave beforehand kind of sort of reproduce this in some way. The Philippines example, in which it was actually incorporated then after this first experience of being more focused on the police response or the counterterrorism effort, it was then incorporated into their development plan. And then the second example in Mexico, in which the information was actually used by a civil society group to essentially force the government to undertake a policy that would tackle gender-based violence. Now, I suppose the second part of it touches on your question, right? Which is, what is the kickback to positive peace? And what I can say with regards to that second example is that it was the government that knew that this was coming and was pre-prepared with a whole level of policy that they knew would then actually get a positive response and essentially allow them to be able to stay on the good books, if you will. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, because the focus of positive peace is on the positive parts of society, it rarely creates conflict when we talk about it. It's always comes from the perspective of, what are the strengths that we as a system, that we as a community can build upon, and what are the particular opportunities there?
Yeah, good. Arthur? Unmute yourself, Arthur.
Yeah.
There you go.
I saw the powerful Soldiers of Peace documentary highlighting the important work of the Global Peace Index some years back. And it's so important, of course, to get this powerful index out to the world. I'm wondering what further promotion you're planning or doing, or what other ways in film and media, and also how to contact you.
That's great, Arthur. Thank you very much. And so the Global Peace Index, we try and do, we obviously have an annual launch. We update the results each year. This year's launch is going to be June 10th. There's going to be 2 online launches. They're going to be managed globally, one that is going to go into Europe and one is going to go into the US. We're also going to be hold 2 additional launches here in the US, in Washington, D.C., with the US Institute of Peace, and in partnership with UN 75 in New York. I say New York and DC, they're both going to be virtual as well, but they're going to cater for 2 slightly different audiences as well. So we're definitely going to be placing a lot of effort behind that, and we're going to be conducting multiple presentations about this year's findings following that. And I'd be extremely happy to speak with anybody who would be interested in us following up with a presentation to any of your organizations or clubs within Rotary or outside. We always try and incorporate positive peace, or definitely incorporate positive peace, in the Global Peace Index. The Global Peace Index really is the pretext for talking more in detail about positive peace. Ultimately, it comes down to exactly what David was talking about. How do we engage with municipalities? How do we engage with communities in building positive peace? This is why we're really excited to be able to continue to strengthen our relationship with Rotary, to work with you guys individually. I'd love to stay in touch, Arthur. My email for everybody is mcollins@economicsandpeace.org. That's M Collins, M for Michael, Collins with 2 L's. We also have this group of Positive Peace activators that is ever expanding, and it is quite likely that you actually have a Positive Peace activator within a 200-mile radius. So if you wanted to engage them on projects or to support your projects, we'd be extremely happy to facilitate that as well.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. And Michael was at our Peace Conference 2020, and before there, they put on a Peace Activator training that was held. So I don't know how many were trained over there, but it was 25 or 30 trainers on positive peace activation. So I appreciate that. One of the things that Michael and I have been discussing is how do we put together a blueprint that would take a city and apply these pillars of positive peace, working with the government and the community together, and change that community to a positive community. And we could do that in some of our more violent cities or peaceful cities, but how do we turn some of these inner cities around to making those a very positive environment and making those an area where you feel comfortable, the gangs are gone, it's an economic powerhouse inner city, and businesses are back. There's healthcare there. There's a real society together again in these cities. And I think that as Rotarians, if we could figure out a blueprint, we're pretty good at applying a blueprint, getting behind a plan. And it's getting to that level where we can understand it especially with my simple brain. How do we connect the dots here and actually put something into place? But we're really looking at that. And Michael, I look forward to working with you more in that arena and how we work together to come up with something that we could really apply city by city, area by area. And I think it ties in with our International Cities of Peace and some of the other work that we're doing out there. So really appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for joining us here. We'll continue to connect with our club. And since you're not a Rotarian yet, we'd invite you to join our club here, because we need a powerhouse in IEP as part of our club, and leverage your knowledge base and connections out there to really strengthen our work across the country and across the world. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. Next week, we have somebody who was on here tonight, and I see that he's disappeared on us. Rob, are you still here? You know what you're getting into next week. And I was going to ask you to say what you're going to talk on next week. But Rob Firsch is the Convergence Center for Policy and Resolution. And I don't see him on here.
Now, Philip Helmick will be introducing him and interviewing him.
Okay.
And I found out once I connected with Rob that we went to Cornell at the same time.
I saw that in his bio.
We were class of 72 the same time. We were freshmen. We shared some freshman experiences together. So it was interesting to connect with Rob. So.
Okay. So keep that in mind for next week. And then 2 weeks from now, believe it or not, we'll be in the month of June. And we have John Hugo, basically the executive director, or the general secretary for RI, and he will be on the docket. And if you have ever had questions to ask about RI, there's the opportunity to talk to John. He usually shows up at a lot of conferences and things like that. So he's a very approachable man. So even though he's from Ukrainian heritage, he's a well-known professional before he became part of Rotary International. So look forward to John's presentation. But next week, Rob will be back. So without further ado, I will do my Tibetan bell, and I will close our meeting unless somebody has any words of wisdom that we should share.
Yeah, stay well and safe out there.
Okay, hibernation.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay, David. Bye-bye.